Welcome, dear viewers, to this compelling journey through one of history's most pivotal moments, the invasion of Poland in 1939. Today we will step back in time and witness the events that ignited the Second World War, shaping the world in ways that still echo to this day. Through vivid storytelling, immersive narratives, and meticulous attention to historical detail, we aim to transport you to a Poland under siege, a nation caught in the devastating whirlwind of war. This video is not just about dates and battles, it's about people, soldiers and civilians, leaders and ordinary citizens, each with their hopes, fears, and struggles. You will see their courage, resilience, and heartbreak, and understand the magnitude of the human experience during this tragic chapter in history. Prepare to witness the triumphs, the tragedies, and the moments that changed the course of nations. Whether you are a history enthusiast, a student, or simply a curious mind, this documentary will engage, educate, and move you. So sit back, open your mind, and let history unfold before your eyes as we explore the invasion of Poland, the beginning of a world at war. Imagine waking up one morning in your own home, and suddenly, the world you know is under attack. The streets you've walked since childhood are torn apart. The people you love are running for their lives. In September 1939, this was the reality for millions of Poles. In just days, tanks rolled across borders, bombs shattered cities, and a nation's destiny was forever changed. This is not just history, it is the story of human courage and suffering, of lives interrupted and dreams destroyed. Are you ready to witness the day the world changed forever? Suscríbete para saber más sobre historia. Dale me gusta y comenta si crees que la historia nunca debe olvidarse, y comparte para generar conversación sobre las lecciones que debemos aprender del pasado. Esto no es un mito, es historia, y empieza aquí. In the late 1930s, Europe stood at a precarious crossroads. The scars of the First World War were still fresh, and yet the continent teetered on the brink of a new conflict. Germany, humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, had risen under Adolf Hitler, promising to restore its honor and expand its borders. Poland, situated between Germany and the Soviet Union, became a focal point of tension, a nation whose strategic position made it both a buffer and a target. The cities buzzed with unease. Warsaw's streets were filled with whispers of war, and families debated the likelihood of an invasion over their evening meals. Governments across Europe watched with a mixture of dread and disbelief, hoping diplomacy could still prevent catastrophe. Yet, the machinery of war was already in motion. Soldiers drilled relentlessly in the barracks, stockpiling weapons and preparing for the worst. Political leaders exchanged urgent telegrams, and newspapers were filled with headlines about German mobilization and aggressive rhetoric. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens went about daily life, unaware that their routines would soon be shattered by the thunder of tanks and the roar of aircraft. The world seemed to hold its breath. In this tense atmosphere, Poland was not only preparing for war, it was witnessing the final moments of fragile peace, moments that would vanish in a matter of days. The stage was set for the invasion that would ignite a global conflict. This prelude was more than military strategy. It was the calm before a storm of human suffering, courage, and resilience that would define generations to come. Poland's geography made it a nation both vital and vulnerable. Stretching across Central Europe, it bordered Germany to the west and the Soviet Union to the east, with smaller frontiers touching Czechoslovakia and Lithuania. For decades, this position had been both a blessing and a curse, providing access to trade routes and cultural exchange, but also exposing the country to repeated invasions. By 1939, these geographical realities were impossible to ignore. Military strategists knew that defending Poland meant anticipating attacks from multiple directions. The vast plains of the country were perfect for rapid armored advances, yet they offered few natural barriers to slow down an invading army. The northern coast, with its strategic port of Gdańsk, was a coveted prize for Germany, promising access to the Baltic Sea. In contrast, The Carpathian Mountains in the south provided some defensive advantage, but could not shield the entire nation. Polish leaders attempted to turn geography into strength. Fortifications were built along key borders, and communication networks were enhanced to facilitate rapid troop movement. Railways became arteries for mobilization, connecting towns and cities in preparation for wartime coordination. Yet, the dual threat of Germany and the Soviet Union created a perilous situation. No single plan could guarantee safety. The Polish people, too, were aware of their precarious position. Farmers in eastern villages looked nervously at the horizon, wondering which way the war might arrive. Children played in fields once untouched by conflict, unaware that their playgrounds could soon become battlefields. In urban centers, discussions in cafes and offices reflected an anxious nation, aware that its fate rested not only on courage, but also on geography itself. Poland's strategic importance extended beyond its borders. European powers observed the country closely, recognizing that control over Poland could determine access to the heart of Europe. For Germany, invading Poland was a calculated step toward expansion and domination. For the Soviet Union, it offered an opportunity to reclaim territory and influence. For Poland, every river, forest, and hill was a potential line of defense and a reminder of the nation's vulnerability. The stage was set for a conflict where geography would shape the fate of soldiers and civilians alike. Poland's strategic position was both its strength and its Achilles heel, a delicate balance that history would soon disrupt in ways unimaginable. By 1939, Adolf Hitler's vision for Germany was no longer hidden. The Führer, driven by a dangerous mix of ideology and personal ambition, aimed to reshape Europe according to his vision of a greater Germany. Poland, situated between Germany and the Soviet Union, was a crucial first step in this plan. Hitler viewed the Polish corridor, the stretch of land giving Poland access to the Baltic Sea, as a barrier to German unity and a symbol of Versailles' humiliation. Beyond territorial claims, he saw Poland as a gateway for expansion eastward, fulfilling his broader concept of Lebensraum, living space for the German people. Hitler's ambitions were clear in his speeches and directives. He declared repeatedly that Germany must assert itself and reclaim what it had lost after World War I. Military planners were tasked with preparing a swift invasion that would shock the world, relying on the element of surprise and the overwhelming power of mechanized warfare. The Wehrmacht underwent rigorous training, while propaganda campaigns painted Poland as a threat to German security, justifying the coming attack in the eyes of the German population. In Berlin, the atmosphere was one of feverish preparation. Officers and aides moved rapidly through corridors of power, delivering orders and updating maps. In private, Hitler met with generals, inspecting troop deployments and approving plans for a lightning strike, later called Blitzkrieg. Tanks, aircraft, and infantry were coordinated with chilling precision, a combination of speed and force designed to overwhelm Poland before allies could intervene. Meanwhile, European leaders watched with unease. Britain and France had signed guarantees to protect Polish independence, but doubts lingered about their willingness to act swiftly. Diplomats scrambled to negotiate, but Hitler's ambitions left little room for compromise. The tension in European capitals mirrored the urgency in Berlin, though few could fully grasp the speed and ferocity of the assault that Germany had in store. Hitler's ambitions were not only territorial but also psychological. He sought to demonstrate German dominance, to instill fear, and to cement his position at the top of Europe's hierarchy of power. The stage was set for a war of unprecedented scale. Poland, brave yet unprepared, would soon face the reality of Hitler's ambitions, a devastating collision of ideology, military strategy, and human lives. The world teetered on the edge, and history was about to be rewritten in the fire of invasion. As tensions in Europe escalated, Poland faced a daunting challenge, defending its territory against two powerful neighbors, Germany in the west and the Soviet Union in the east. Polish military leaders knew the stakes were high. With limited resources compared to Germany's rapidly expanding army, they relied on strategic planning, defensive fortifications, and the determination of their troops. Across the country, preparations were underway, combining modern techniques with traditional military values. As Poland sought to balance hope and pragmatism, soldiers drilled relentlessly in training camps, learning the intricacies of rifles, artillery, and communication systems. Officers studied maps day and night, analyzing potential invasion routes and planning counterattacks. Poland's military structure emphasized mobility, using railways to deploy units quickly across long distances. Despite constraints, there was a strong sense of national pride and resolve. Civilians contributed as well, building barricades in towns, stockpiling supplies, and volunteering in auxiliary roles to support the army. The government also sought to secure international support. Diplomatic channels were opened to Britain and France, emphasizing Poland's commitment to defend its independence while hoping for timely assistance if conflict erupted. Propaganda campaigns encouraged unity and resilience, aiming to strengthen morale across the nation. Schools taught children basic drills, while newspapers featured stories of past heroism to remind citizens of their enduring spirit. In key border regions, fortifications were constructed, concrete bunkers dotted strategic points, and minefields were laid along vulnerable areas. Cavalry units, a symbol of Poland's military tradition, remained ready to act both offensively and defensively. Airfields were prepared for reconnaissance missions and to counter the growing threat of the Luftwaffe. Though the army faced modern mechanized forces, these preparations reflected Poland's determination to resist aggression and preserve its sovereignty. Yet, even with careful planning, challenges remained. Equipment shortages, outdated technology, and the sheer scale of potential invasions weighed heavily on leaders' minds. Civilians felt the anxiety too, sensing that the fragile peace could collapse at any moment. Streets buzzed with activity as families discussed the looming threat. Soldiers marched through towns to maintain readiness, and children observed drills with curiosity and concern. Every corner of the nation seemed to vibrate with anticipation, a collective preparation for a conflict whose impact would ripple through generations. Polish preparedness was more than military strategy. It was a demonstration of national resilience, unity, and hope. Though the storm of war was approaching, Poland stood ready, its people determined to defend their homeland with courage, skill, and unwavering spirit. In the days ahead, these preparations would be tested as never before, shaping the course of history and the fate of millions. On August 23, 1939, the world witnessed a shocking twist in European politics. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty that would forever change Poland's fate. Publicly, the agreement promised peace between the two powers, but secretly, it contained a protocol dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland, trapped between these two giants, was destined to be partitioned. The treaty stunned diplomats, leaders, and citizens alike. For Poland, it was a political nightmare, a guarantee that it would face aggression from both East and West, with little hope of external support. In Berlin, Hitler celebrated the pact as a masterstroke of strategy. The German leader had secured his eastern flank, allowing him to focus entirely on invading Poland without fear of Soviet interference. German generals reviewed detailed invasion plans with renewed confidence, knowing that the Soviet Union would not intervene. Propaganda machinery spun the pact as a symbol of diplomacy and order, hiding the sinister reality from the German public. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Soviet leaders approached the pact with cautious pragmatism. Joseph Stalin saw an opportunity to reclaim territories lost after World War I and extend Soviet influence westward. Soviet troops began mobilizing near the Polish border, preparing for a future occupation that would soon follow the German invasion. The presence of the Soviet army, though not publicly acknowledged, added an invisible yet ominous threat to Poland's already precarious position. Polish leaders, despite their awareness of German intentions, were blindsided by the Soviet agreement. Efforts to secure aid from Britain and France intensified, but even their promises of support could not counterbalance the looming reality. Poland faced a two-front threat far beyond its military capacity. Civilians, meanwhile, were largely unaware of the full implications. Families in towns and villages continued their daily routines, unaware that the borders they had known for decades would soon be violently redrawn. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was more than a diplomatic agreement. It was a betrayal that sealed Poland's destiny. It demonstrated the brutal pragmatism of totalitarian regimes, for whom the lives of millions could be sacrificed for political gain. As news of the pact spread, Polish soldiers and officers felt a mixture of anger, dread, and determination. They knew that the coming invasion would test not only their tactical skills but also their resilience and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. By the time September arrived, the pact had set the stage for catastrophe. Poland, caught between Germany and the Soviet Union, braced for the storm. The world would soon witness the devastating consequences of diplomacy twisted by ambition, secrecy, and the ruthless calculus of power. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was not just a treaty, it was the beginning of Poland's darkest chapter, the prelude to a war that would engulf the continent and change history forever. With the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact secured, Germany's focus shifted entirely to preparing for war. The Wehrmacht, Germany's formidable military force, entered a state of rapid mobilization. Troops were called to barracks, trains ferried soldiers to the eastern borders, and vehicles rolled through city streets, carrying weapons, artillery, and supplies. The nation seemed electrified with purpose, each step meticulously planned to ensure the swift execution of Hitler's vision. Soldiers drilled endlessly, learning the coordination necessary for a Blitzkrieg, a lightning war combining tanks, infantry, and air power to overwhelm opponents in days. Factories worked around the clock, producing tanks, rifles, and ammunition, while engineers tested new armored vehicles and aircraft. Communication networks were strengthened to maintain control over the rapidly advancing army. Commanders studied maps with precision, calculating every route and anticipating every possible counterattack. The atmosphere was tense yet disciplined, with a sense of inevitability pervading both military and civilian spheres. Propaganda fueled morale, portraying the campaign as a righteous mission to restore Germany's honor. Civilians, meanwhile, witnessed the massive military buildup with a mix of awe and apprehension. Crowds gathered to watch trains carrying troops and tanks, cheering at parades while whispering anxiously about the implications. Families of soldiers waved goodbye, hoping their loved ones would return safely. In towns near the border, citizens noticed the influx of soldiers and armored vehicles, realizing that the world they knew was about to change. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, prepared for its crucial role in the invasion. Pilots conducted reconnaissance flights, practicing bombing runs and coordinating with ground troops. Every unit, from cavalry to mechanized divisions, was synchronized for maximum efficiency. German generals, confident yet calculating, ensured that each component of the army was ready to move with precise timing, understanding that speed and surprise would determine the success of the campaign. Meanwhile, spies and intelligence officers monitored Polish communications, gathering crucial information about troop locations, fortifications, and possible resistance. The coordination of intelligence, logistics, and raw military power made Germany's mobilization a terrifyingly effective machine. Poland, despite its best efforts, could not match the scale or speed of this preparation. As September approached, German mobilization reached its peak. Soldiers stood ready along the eastern border, tanks rumbled into position, and the skies were patrolled by reconnaissance planes. The invasion was imminent, a culmination of months of planning, preparation, and ambition. For Germany, it was the moment to strike. For Poland, the calm before a storm that would test courage, resilience, and the very survival of the nation. The world held its breath, awaiting the events that would ignite the flames of a war unlike any seen before. On September 1st, 1939, the long-anticipated moment arrived. Germany launched its invasion of Poland, marking the beginning of the Second World War. At dawn, the quiet of the Polish countryside and towns was shattered by the thunder of artillery and the roar of Luftwaffe aircraft. The Blitzkrieg, The lightning war was unleashed with terrifying precision. Tanks rolled across open plains, infantry surged forward, and planes strafed roads and railways, leaving devastation in their wake. The first strikes were both strategic and psychological. German forces targeted key cities, rail hubs and communication lines, aiming to paralyze Polish defenses before they could fully mobilize. Warsaw, Krakow, and Gdansk were immediately threatened, while smaller towns experienced aerial bombardment and rapid advances of armored divisions. Civilians fled in panic, packing belongings into carts or clinging to family members as they sought refuge. Smoke rose from burning buildings, and the cries of the wounded echoed through streets and villages, signaling the brutal reality of modern warfare. Polish soldiers, though outnumbered and outgunned, responded with courage. Infantry units manned defensive positions, artillery crews fired relentlessly at advancing tanks, and pilots scrambled to intercept German aircraft. Communication was chaotic but relentless. Messages relayed along radio lines and runners raced across the battlefield to coordinate counterattacks. Despite the overwhelming odds, acts of heroism emerged everywhere: soldiers shielding civilians, officers rallying troops under fire, and local militias joining the resistance. The psychological impact of the first strikes was immense. Civilians, who had lived under the shadow of impending war, now faced the reality of occupation and destruction. Families huddled in basements and shelters, clutching each other as bombs fell above. The terror of sudden invasion highlighted both the vulnerability and resilience of the Polish people. Children cried, women tended to the injured, and men tried desperately to protect their homes and communities. Across the battlefields, the German army executed its strategy flawlessly. Coordinated air and ground attacks allowed armored units to penetrate deep into Polish territory, forcing rapid retreats and disorganization among defenders. Yet, despite the precision of the invasion, Polish resistance was tenacious. Even as towns fell, soldiers regrouped, civilians assisted in defense efforts, and the will to resist remained unbroken. By the end of the first day, Poland had already endured immense loss, but the spirit of resistance had been ignited. The first strikes demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of modern mechanized warfare, but they also revealed the courage, determination, and sacrifice of a nation under siege. September 1st would be remembered, not only as the day the world entered war, but also as a testament to the indomitable human spirit facing overwhelming odds. One of the first and most iconic acts of Polish resistance occurred at Westerplatte, a small peninsula in the free city of Danzig, Gdansk, on September 1st, 1939. As German battleships and troops advanced, the Polish garrison stationed there faced overwhelming odds. The fortification was modest, defended by just over 180 soldiers under the command of Major Henryk Sikorski, but their determination would turn Westerplatte into a symbol of courage and defiance. At dawn, German ships opened fire with heavy artillery, while infantry units moved to storm the outpost. Explosions shook the ground, and smoke filled the air as shells hit barracks, guard posts, and supply depots. The Polish defenders responded with precision, manning machine guns, rifles, and mortars. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they held their positions, repelling multiple assaults and causing significant German casualties. Every hour of resistance demonstrated meticulous planning, bravery, and unity among the soldiers, who knew that surrender was likely but refused to abandon their post. The siege was not just a military confrontation, it was a psychological battle. German commanders expected a quick surrender, but the defenders' resilience frustrated and enraged them. Polish soldiers endured bombardment, shortages of ammunition, and constant threats, yet morale remained high. Officers rotated among positions, encouraging men and maintaining communication across the outpost. Civilians and port workers nearby watched anxiously, understanding that the outcome of Westerplatte could inspire or demoralize the nation. Major Sikorski and his officers coordinated every defense, using the terrain effectively. Concrete fortifications, trenches, and observation points were leveraged to maximize the garrison's limited firepower. Soldiers improvised where supplies ran low, using ingenuity to repair weapons, redistribute ammunition, and set traps for the advancing enemy. Each day they resisted the German onslaught, demonstrating that determination and strategy could challenge sheer numerical superiority. The siege of Westerplatte became a symbol of Polish courage in the face of adversity. News of the defenders' stand spread quickly, inspiring soldiers and civilians elsewhere. It showed that even a small determined group could stand against a powerful invader and protect the honor of their nation. For 7 days, Westerplatte resisted the German army, delaying operations and sending a powerful message of defiance. Though the garrison eventually surrendered due to exhaustion and lack of supplies, their stand became legendary. Westerplatte illustrated that bravery and sacrifice could leave a mark far beyond the battlefield. In the early days of the invasion, it demonstrated to the world that Poland would not fall without a fight, setting the tone for resistance and resilience that would define the nation's struggle in the years to come. As the German invasion advanced, one of the most terrifying aspects of the attack on Poland was the relentless air raids. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, unleashed waves of bombers and fighter planes over Polish cities, targeting infrastructure, communication hubs, and civilian areas. Warsaw, Krakow, and Gdansk experienced unprecedented devastation as bombs rained down, buildings collapsed, and fires spread uncontrollably. The aim was not only military, disabling railways, bridges, and command centers, but psychological, instilling fear and chaos among civilians and defenders alike. On the streets of Warsaw, the attacks began early in the morning. Air raid sirens wailed, sending people scrambling for shelter. Families clutched one another, dashing to basements and bunkers, while others carried children and valuables through smoke-filled streets. Soldiers attempted to coordinate anti-aircraft defenses, firing at the invading aircraft, but the overwhelming numbers and speed of the Luftwaffe made resistance difficult. The sky was filled with the droning of engines, the roar of explosions, and the screams of those caught in the destruction, creating a surreal and terrifying atmosphere. The air raids caused widespread panic and confusion. Civilians abandoned homes, shops, and workplaces, leaving behind everything they could not carry. Hospitals overflowed with the injured, and first responders struggled to maintain order amid collapsing buildings and fires. Streets became chaotic rivers of fleeing people, carts, and vehicles, all moving frantically to escape the bombing. Soldiers on the ground, while engaged in combat, also helped evacuate civilians, demonstrating courage and humanity amidst the terror. In addition to physical destruction, the raids were meant to demoralize Poland's leadership. Key government buildings, communication centers, and transportation hubs were primary targets. While some offices were destroyed, Polish officials continued to operate in makeshift command posts, issuing orders and coordinating defenses. The resilience of both military and civilian populations under such pressure showcased the determination of the Polish people to endure, adapt, and resist, despite overwhelming adversity. The psychological impact of the air raids was profound. Families lived in constant fear, children hid under tables or in basements, and the sense of normalcy vanished almost instantly. Yet, amidst the chaos, acts of heroism emerged. Neighbors helping neighbors, soldiers rescuing trapped civilians, and firefighters risking their lives to contain blazes. The raids were devastating, but they also revealed the extraordinary resilience and solidarity of the population. By the end of the initial wave, much of the targeted urban infrastructure lay in ruins, but the human spirit remained unbroken. Air raids had succeeded in sowing terror, yet they had also awakened courage, unity, and determination. Poland's cities bore the scars of modern warfare, and their citizens faced a new reality, life under relentless attack, where survival depended on vigilance, bravery, and hope. As German forces advanced and air raids devastated cities, millions of Polish civilians faced the urgent need to flee their homes. The mass evacuation began almost immediately, a chaotic exodus driven by fear, survival instincts, and the hope of reaching safer regions. Roads were clogged with carts, bicycles, horse-drawn wagons, and people on foot, all moving toward the countryside or less targeted towns. Families carried their few belongings, children clutched tightly in parents' arms, and the elderly struggled along narrow roads, under the strain of fear and uncertainty. The scale of the evacuation was staggering. Cities like Warsaw and Krakow emptied rapidly as citizens fled both bombings and the advancing Wehrmacht. Trains were overcrowded, with passengers crammed together for hours, while roads outside urban centers became streams of humanity stretching for miles. Villagers who had remained neutral witnesses to the approaching war suddenly found themselves sheltering strangers, offering food, water, and guidance. Entire communities worked together to assist refugees, setting up temporary shelters in barns, churches, and schoolhouses. Polish soldiers played a critical role in the evacuation, assisting civilians while maintaining defensive positions. Some units escorted convoys, protecting the fleeing populations from air raids and small German incursions. Others organized routes to prevent bottlenecks, directing families towards safer zones while coordinating with local authorities. Even amid their own fears and uncertainty, these soldiers demonstrated extraordinary dedication and humanity, bridging the gap between military necessity and civilian survival. The journey was perilous. Bombing raids continued along major roads and railways, destroying bridges and rail lines, forcing desperate travelers to detour through forests and fields. Weather compounded the difficulty. Rain turned roads into mud, slowing wagons and making travel exhausting. Hunger, fatigue, and illness became constant companions for evacuees, who relied on the generosity of local farmers and temporary shelters for sustenance. Children cried from fear and exhaustion, yet their parents' determination to protect them never wavered. Despite the chaos, the evacuation revealed the resilience and solidarity of the Polish people. Strangers helped strangers, neighbors shared resources, and soldiers guided civilians through dangerous zones. The sense of community and shared struggle became a lifeline in a time of extreme adversity. Families, though separated or displaced, held on to hope and faith that Poland's courage and perseverance would endure. By the end of the first days of evacuation, hundreds of thousands had left their homes, carrying with them memories, belongings, and the trauma of war. Roads and railways bore witness to the human cost of invasion, yet also to the courage and determination of a nation under siege. The evacuation was not just a flight for survival, it was a testament to the enduring spirit of Poland, a story of sacrifice, resilience, and the relentless hope for safety and freedom in the darkest hours of history. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, myths and misconceptions about the Polish cavalry quickly emerged, some propagated by enemy propaganda, others by confusion in the chaos of battle. The image of Polish horsemen charging headlong against German tanks became emblematic of brave but futile resistance, yet the reality was far more complex. Polish cavalry units were highly trained, mobile forces used for reconnaissance, rapid flanking maneuvers, and delaying enemy advances, not for suicidal charges against armored vehicles. In the early days of the invasion, cavalry units were deployed across open plains and near forests to gather intelligence, engage enemy scouts, and harass advancing troops. Their horses provided unmatched mobility, allowing soldiers to move quickly over terrain inaccessible to mechanized units. These units carried sabers, lances, and rifles, ready to fight in multiple scenarios. Officers coordinated with infantry and artillery, ensuring cavalry actions complemented larger defensive operations. Despite this strategic approach, confusion and enemy propaganda distorted perceptions, creating the enduring myth of hopeless charges against tanks. The myth was fueled by incidents that, while rare, were dramatic. In skirmishes where cavalry confronted armored or mechanized units, soldiers sometimes attempted daring maneuvers to delay the enemy, relying on mobility and surprise. These actions, while brave, were not standard practice. They were desperate measures in a rapidly collapsing front. German propaganda later exaggerated these encounters, portraying them as reckless heroics against impossible odds. Civilians and observers, watching from towns or forests, sometimes misinterpreted cavalry movements. Horses galloping across fields, soldiers charging into enemy positions, and smoke from distant explosions created vivid images that reinforced the notion of outdated tactics. Yet behind these appearances were disciplined soldiers executing modern military strategies under extreme pressure. Cavalry units were essential for scouting enemy positions, relaying messages and disrupting supply lines, often at great personal risk. The myth of the cavalry charge also obscured the extraordinary bravery and ingenuity of Polish soldiers. These men adapted to new technologies, coordinated with infantry and artillery, and used terrain effectively to maximize their impact. Even in moments of extreme danger, cavalry units provided critical intelligence, slowed German advances, and inspired both military personnel and civilians alike. Their horses were not symbols of futility but of mobility, adaptability, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. In retrospect, the myth of the cavalry charge has persisted as a dramatic narrative, overshadowing the real contributions of these units. Polish cavalry was a testament to skill, strategy, and resilience, demonstrating that even in a war dominated by tanks and planes, disciplined soldiers on horseback could play a vital role in defense and resistance. The reality was far richer than legend, a story of courage, innovation, and the determination of a nation refusing to surrender. The free city of Danzig, known as Gdańsk, became one of the first major urban centers to feel the full force of the German invasion. On September 1, 1939, German forces began their assault on the city, seeking to secure this strategic Baltic port and eliminate Polish resistance. Gdańsk's location made it a key target. Controlling the city allowed Germany access to maritime routes and the ability to launch further operations into northern Poland. For the Polish defenders, the city was both a vital asset and a symbol of national pride. Polish troops stationed in Gdańsk faced overwhelming odds. The city was defended by a combination of military personnel and local volunteers who had prepared for months, reinforcing fortifications, barricading streets, and readying artillery positions. Soldiers manned bunkers, patrolled streets, and guarded key infrastructure, including railways, bridges, and government buildings. Civilians contributed by transporting supplies, relaying messages, and assisting in medical care. Despite their preparation, the defenders knew that German forces had superior numbers, tanks, and air support. The German assault combined ground and aerial attacks. Bombers and dive bombers targeted bridges, roads, and key defensive positions, while armored divisions moved into the city from multiple directions. Streets became battlefields, with explosions and gunfire echoing between buildings. Civilians fled homes and workplaces, seeking shelter in basements and cellars, while soldiers engaged the enemy in fierce close-quarters combat. The intensity of the assault highlighted the efficiency of German Blitzkrieg tactics, speed, coordination, and overwhelming firepower, designed to crush resistance before reinforcements could arrive. Polish defenders displayed remarkable courage. Despite being outmatched, they held strategic positions, delayed German advances, and inflicted significant casualties. Officers coordinated counterattacks, utilizing urban terrain to their advantage and improvising defensive measures when necessary. Local volunteers, including students and port workers, assisted in transporting ammunition, evacuating the wounded, and fortifying barricades, demonstrating the unity and resilience of the city's population. After days of relentless fighting, the fall of Gdańsk became inevitable. German forces penetrated the final defensive lines, capturing key positions and forcing Polish troops to retreat or surrender. Civilians, though traumatized, had witnessed extraordinary bravery and solidarity among defenders. The fall of Gdańsk, while a tactical loss, became a symbol of resistance, a testament to determination, courage, and national pride, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The capture of Gdańsk allowed Germany to secure a crucial port, facilitating further military operations in northern Poland. Yet, the defense of the city would echo in history, inspiring other Polish units and civilians to continue resisting the invaders. It was a stark reminder that even when defeat seemed inevitable, courage and resilience could leave an enduring legacy. The Battle of Tizoo Bridges was one of the earliest and most strategically significant engagements of the German invasion. Situated on the Vistula River, the town of Tizoo controlled vital railway bridges that linked Gdańsk with the rest of Poland. German forces recognized that seizing these bridges would allow rapid troop and tank movements deeper into Polish territory. For the Polish defenders, holding Tizoo was crucial to slowing the German advance and protecting the heartland of the nation. Polish forces in Tizoo were composed of regular army units, engineers, and local volunteers. Soldiers fortified the bridges with barricades, sandbags, and explosives, preparing for the inevitable attack. Engineers carefully rigged demolition charges on key structural points, intending to deny the enemy easy access. Infantry units were stationed along both sides of the bridges, ready to fire upon approaching enemy columns. Civilians, aware of the impending battle, assisted by transporting supplies and providing intelligence on German movements. On September 1st, German forces advanced with precision. Armored units moved along rail lines and roads, supported by air attacks from the Luftwaffe. Dive bombers targeted the bridges, aiming to destroy key points and force a rapid surrender. The sound of artillery and explosions echoed across the Vistula as Polish soldiers engaged in fierce resistance. Despite being outnumbered and facing superior firepower, the defenders fought with determination, repelling several initial assaults and inflicting casualties on the attacking forces. The engineers executed demolition plans under extreme pressure. In moments of intense fighting, explosives were detonated to partially damage the bridges, slowing the German advance and buying crucial time for retreating units. Soldiers adapted to rapidly changing battlefield conditions, repositioning troops, reinforcing barricades, and coordinating with nearby units to maximize defensive effectiveness. Even in the chaos, orders were relayed quickly, reflecting discipline and strategic awareness. The battle demonstrated both the effectiveness and limitations of Polish defensive tactics. While the bridges were not held indefinitely, the resistance delayed German operations and forced adjustments in their campaign timetable. Civilians witnessed the courage of the defenders, with families helping wounded soldiers and providing vital support. The combination of military strategy, engineering skill, and civilian cooperation highlighted the resilience of Poland in the face of overwhelming odds. By the end of the engagement, German forces eventually secured the bridges, but the cost was significant. The bravery of the Polish defenders at Tizoo became an early symbol of resistance, showing that even small units, through ingenuity and determination, could challenge a technologically superior foe. The battle set the stage for subsequent confrontations and emphasized the strategic importance of infrastructure in modern warfare. The Pomeranian Corridor, a narrow strip of land connecting Poland to the Baltic Sea, became one of the most critical defensive areas during the German invasion. Controlling the corridor was essential for Poland's access to maritime routes and to maintain communication between northern and central regions. German forces recognized its strategic importance and launched concentrated attacks to seize it quickly, intending to cut Poland off from the coast. Polish defenders understood that holding this corridor, even temporarily, could slow the German advance and protect vital territories. Polish forces in the corridor were a mix of regular army units, local militias, and engineers. Troops fortified towns, villages, and key road junctions, while bridges and railways were prepared for demolition to hinder enemy movements. Trenches, barricades, and defensive positions were established along major approaches. Civilians were mobilized to assist, transporting supplies, evacuating the wounded, and helping to reinforce defenses. The sense of urgency was palpable, as the corridor's narrow geography made it both a defensible position and a potential trap. German forces advanced with overwhelming mechanized power. Tanks and infantry moved swiftly along the corridor, supported by air raids from the Luftwaffe. Bombing runs destroyed bridges, roads, and communication lines, creating chaos among defenders and civilians alike. Despite this, Polish soldiers used the terrain to their advantage, setting ambushes along forests, river crossings, and narrow roads, and targeting supply lines to slow the enemy. Artillery units fired from hidden positions, inflicting casualties and creating pockets of resistance that delayed the German timetable. The defense required coordination and improvisation. Officers relayed orders through runners, field telephones, and radios, while soldiers adapted to shifting battle conditions. Engineers repaired damaged roads and bridges under fire, ensuring that retreat and supply lines remained operational. Cavalry units conducted reconnaissance and harassing attacks against advancing columns, buying precious time for infantry and artillery units to regroup. Civilians assisted tirelessly, moving ammunition, food, and medical supplies to frontline positions. Though heavily outnumbered, the defenders' tenacity forced German forces to adjust their strategy. Multiple attacks were repelled, and casualties on both sides mounted. Polish resistance in the Pomeranian corridor became a symbol of determination, showing that even in a small, vulnerable area, courage and strategy could challenge a technologically superior foe. Stories of local heroism, soldiers risking their lives to protect civilians, volunteers aiding wounded, and officers organizing counterattacks, spread rapidly, boosting morale elsewhere in the country. Ultimately, while the corridor could not be held indefinitely, its defense delayed the German advance, disrupted logistics, and allowed civilians and troops to evacuate key areas. The stand in the Pomeranian corridor highlighted the strategic importance of geography, the ingenuity of defensive tactics, and the resilience of a nation under siege. It was a testament to the courage of Polish soldiers and civilians who faced overwhelming odds with determination and unity. By September 3, 1939, German forces had turned their attention to Bydgoszcz, a key city in the Pomeranian region. Its strategic location along major railways and roads made it a critical objective for the advancing Wehrmacht. The siege of Bydgoszcz would become a fierce and brutal struggle, marked by urban combat, civilian involvement, and the complexities of modern warfare. Polish defenders understood that holding the city, even temporarily, could disrupt German operations and protect northern Poland from rapid occupation. Polish forces in Bydgoszcz consisted of regular infantry, local militias, and volunteers who had prepared for weeks. Soldiers fortified key buildings, bridges, and streets, using barricades and improvised defensive positions. Artillery units were positioned to target advancing tanks and infantry columns, while snipers occupied rooftops to slow enemy progress. Civilians played a crucial role, helping transport supplies, evacuating the wounded, and reinforcing barricades. The city became a collective fortress, blending military and civilian efforts in a desperate attempt to resist the invaders. German forces approached with overwhelming mechanized power. Tanks and armored vehicles moved through the city's outskirts, supported by artillery and Luftwaffe bombers. Streets became battlegrounds as German infantry advanced under the cover of tanks and air raids. Buildings exploded under artillery fire. Smoke filled the streets, and chaos reigned as defenders engaged in close-quarters combat. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, Polish soldiers used urban terrain to their advantage, launching ambushes from alleys, firing from windows, and counterattacking strategically to slow the German advance. The siege highlighted both courage and tragedy. Soldiers and civilians alike faced immense danger as shells destroyed homes and infrastructure. Families sought shelter in basements, while soldiers risked their lives to rescue the injured or reinforce defensive positions. Officers coordinated counterattacks, redistributed ammunition, and maintained communication lines, demonstrating discipline and strategic thinking even amid chaos. Local militias and volunteers proved essential, moving supplies, setting traps, and assisting in evacuation efforts. After several days of relentless fighting, German forces eventually penetrated the city's defenses. The defenders, though exhausted, had inflicted significant casualties and delayed the enemy's timetable. Civilians, though traumatized, had witnessed acts of extraordinary bravery and solidarity. The siege of Bydgoszcz, while ending in German occupation, became an enduring symbol of resistance and the human spirit's determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle also underscored the challenges of urban warfare, coordination, mobility, and civilian protection, lessons that would resonate throughout the early days of World War II. The courage displayed by Polish soldiers and civilians during the siege of Bydgoszcz remained a testament to resilience, ingenuity, and the will to defend one's homeland against a powerful and ruthless enemy. As the siege of Westerplatte raged on, Polish High Command recognized the strategic and symbolic importance of the garrison. Efforts were made to send reinforcements and supplies to the beleaguered defenders. Small groups of soldiers, ammunition, and medical supplies were dispatched from nearby ports and railways under heavy secrecy. The journey was perilous, with German reconnaissance aircraft patrolling the skies and artillery fire threatening every approach. Upon arrival, reinforcements bolstered morale and firepower. Soldiers quickly integrated with the original garrison, taking positions in trenches, bunkers, and along key defensive points. Engineers strengthened barricades, repaired damaged fortifications, and coordinated with artillery crews to maximize defensive capabilities. Civilians nearby assisted in transporting ammunition and providing food and water to troops, exemplifying the unity between soldiers and citizens. Despite their arrival, reinforcements could not change the garrison's vulnerability. The Polish soldiers faced a relentless German assault, with tanks, infantry, and Luftwaffe attacks combining to create a near-impenetrable siege. Yet their presence allowed the defenders to hold out longer, continuing to repel German advances and inflict casualties. Westerplatte remained a symbol of resistance and defiance, demonstrating that courage and determination could delay a far stronger enemy. The Battle of Jogi, beginning in early September 1939, became one of the largest engagements in central Poland. German forces advanced with overwhelming mechanized power, seeking to encircle and destroy Polish units defending the industrial city. Polish commanders implemented defensive strategies, fortifying the city and surrounding areas to protect both civilians and critical infrastructure. Polish troops utilized trenches, barricades, and urban terrain to slow German advances. Artillery units were positioned to target advancing columns, while cavalry conducted reconnaissance and flanking maneuvers. Civilians contributed by moving supplies, tending to the wounded, and aiding defensive operations. Despite intense bombing from the Luftwaffe and the threat of tanks, defenders repelled multiple assaults, buying crucial time for retreating units to regroup. The battle's intensity highlighted the ferocity of modern warfare. Streets became battlegrounds, buildings were destroyed, and communication lines were disrupted. Yet, Polish resilience persisted. Officers coordinated counterattacks, soldiers improvised defensive positions, and civilians provided unwavering support. Though Jogi eventually fell, the defense delayed German operations and demonstrated extraordinary determination against overwhelming odds. Modlin Fortress, located near Warsaw, became a crucial defensive stronghold during the German invasion. The fortress was well fortified with artillery, trenches, and barracks capable of holding thousands of soldiers. Polish commanders prioritized its defense, understanding that it could serve as a bastion to delay German advances toward the capital. As German forces approached, bombers from the Luftwaffe targeted key positions, while tanks and infantry advanced to breach outer defenses. Polish soldiers manned artillery, machine guns, and trenches, using the fortress's strategic position to hold off enemy attacks. Officers coordinated defensive strategies, relaying orders to various sectors and directing counterattacks. Civilians and support personnel worked tirelessly to maintain supplies, repair fortifications, and evacuate the wounded. Despite intense pressure, the defenders inflicted heavy casualties and slowed German progress. The fortress became a symbol of Polish resilience, demonstrating that well-prepared positions combined with determination and coordination could withstand even superior forces. Soldiers rotated positions, adapted to damage, and continued to fight bravely, earning the respect of both allies and adversaries. By mid-September, continuous assaults and shortages forced the fortress to consider surrender. Nevertheless, the defense of Modlin delayed German plans, allowing other units to regroup and civilians to evacuate, highlighting the strategic significance of fortified positions in the early stages of World War II. The Battle of the Buzura River, beginning on September 9, 1939, was the largest Polish counteroffensive during the invasion. Polish forces, primarily from the Poznan and Pomorze armies, sought to halt the German advance toward Warsaw and relieve pressure on the capital. The operation aimed to disrupt German lines, recapture towns, and boost morale amidst a rapidly deteriorating situation. The Buzura River region became the scene of intense fighting. Polish troops used the natural terrain, forests, rivers, and bridges to launch ambushes and surprise attacks on German columns. Cavalry units provided reconnaissance and executed flanking maneuvers, while infantry and artillery engaged enemy tanks and mechanized units. Officers coordinated movements across difficult terrain, issuing orders despite disrupted communication lines. Civilians in nearby villages assisted by transporting ammunition, providing intelligence, and evacuating the wounded. Initially, the Polish counterattack achieved some success. German units were pushed back in certain sectors, roads were temporarily cut, and bridges recaptured. Polish soldiers displayed extraordinary bravery, attacking with limited resources against a better-equipped enemy. However, the Germans quickly regrouped, employing mechanized reinforcements and overwhelming air support to counter Polish advances. Luftwaffe bombers targeted roads, villages, and Polish positions, causing chaos and disrupting supply lines. The battle highlighted both the courage and vulnerability of the Polish forces. Despite strategic planning and daring maneuvers, shortages of ammunition, communication difficulties, and superior German firepower eventually forced Polish units to retreat. Yet the Buzura offensive delayed German operations, inflicted notable casualties, and demonstrated that coordinated counterattacks could challenge an invader, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The Buzura River battle became a symbol of resilience, tactical ingenuity, and national pride. Soldiers and civilians alike endured tremendous hardship, fighting to protect their homeland while maintaining the hope of slowing the enemy's advance. Though ultimately unsuccessful in altering the course of the campaign, the offensive demonstrated that Polish forces could resist with strategy, courage, and determination. By mid-September 1939, Warsaw faced a full-scale siege by German forces. The capital, home to hundreds of thousands of civilians and a key political center, became a focal point of the invasion. German strategy aimed to quickly capture Warsaw using a combination of mechanized units, artillery, and relentless air bombardment. For Polish defenders, holding the city was both a military necessity and a symbol of national resistance. Polish troops, composed of regular army units, hastily organized militias, and support personnel, fortified the city's streets, bridges, and key buildings. Barricades were erected along major roads, rooftops were occupied by snipers, and artillery units were positioned on the outskirts to target advancing German columns. Civilians became actively involved, assisting in moving supplies, tending to the wounded, and reinforcing barricades. The city transformed into a fortress, blending military planning with civilian resilience. The siege was marked by relentless air raids and artillery shelling. Buildings collapsed, fires spread uncontrollably, and streets were filled with smoke and debris. Civilians fled basements and shelters during bombardments, while soldiers fought to maintain defensive positions under extreme pressure. Communication was often disrupted, yet officers coordinated units as best as possible, rotating soldiers, directing artillery, and organizing counterattacks. Despite German superiority in firepower and numbers, Polish defenders held key positions for weeks. Snipers and infantry inflicted casualties, artillery disrupted armored advances, and civilians supported logistics and morale. Stories of bravery, including soldiers defending barricades and families protecting the wounded, became emblematic of Warsaw's resistance. The siege revealed the human cost of urban warfare, with immense destruction but extraordinary courage. The city's resistance slowed the German timetable, allowing other units to regroup and evacuate civilians from surrounding areas. While Warsaw eventually fell in late September, the siege became a symbol of Polish determination and the will to resist. The courage displayed by soldiers and civilians alike underscored the resilience of a nation fighting against overwhelming odds, leaving a legacy that would inspire generations. The Hel Peninsula, a narrow strip of land jutting into the Baltic Sea, became one of Poland's last defensive outposts during the invasion. German forces sought to capture it quickly to secure control of the coastline and the port of Gdynia. For the Polish garrison, which included naval personnel, infantry, and coastal artillery units, the peninsula offered a unique defensive advantage. Its narrow geography allowed concentrated defensive positions, and its fortifications had been strengthened in anticipation of possible attacks. The defense of Hell began with German air raids and naval bombardments. The Luftwaffe targeted coastal batteries and defensive positions, while Kriegsmarine ships shelled the peninsula from the sea. Polish artillery returned fire, demonstrating remarkable precision despite limited ammunition and personnel. Soldiers manned bunkers and trenches, while sailors and engineers coordinated efforts to maintain defensive operations. Civilians and support staff assisted by delivering food, water, and medical aid to the front lines. Despite being heavily outnumbered and outgunned, Polish forces held key positions, repelling several German landing attempts. Coastal batteries sank enemy vessels, artillery disrupted troop movements, and snipers targeted advancing soldiers. The narrow terrain made frontal assaults difficult for the Germans, allowing defenders to maximize their limited resources. Communication between units was maintained through radio, runners, and signal systems, ensuring coordination under extreme pressure. The siege of Hell Peninsula demonstrated resilience and ingenuity. Soldiers rotated shifts, repaired damaged fortifications, and adapted to evolving threats. Civilians played a critical role, maintaining supply lines and assisting with the evacuation of the wounded. Even as surrounding regions fell to German forces, Hell remained a bastion of resistance, symbolizing Poland's determination to defend every inch of its territory. After weeks of fighting, continuous bombardment, and dwindling supplies, the garrison eventually surrendered in early October. However, the defense delayed German operations along the coast and inflicted significant casualties. The Battle of Hell Peninsula became an enduring symbol of courage, discipline, and strategic defense in the face of overwhelming odds. As German forces advanced through Poland, the Einsatzgruppen, special SS units tasked with security and terror, followed behind the front lines. Their mission was brutal: eliminate perceived political threats, intimidate civilians, and instill fear to weaken resistance. The activities of these units marked the beginning of systematic atrocities against civilians, intellectuals, clergy, and community leaders. Villages and towns faced immediate terror. Einsatzgruppen conducted mass arrests, executions, and intimidation campaigns. Families were separated, homes were searched and often destroyed, and local leaders were targeted. Reports of massacres and public executions spread fear throughout the country, leaving civilians traumatized and uncertain about survival. Soldiers on the front lines witnessed the aftermath, realizing the dual threat of invasion and occupation. Polish civilians endured atrocities with resilience. Communities attempted to hide vulnerable individuals, preserve essential records, and maintain some semblance of daily life, despite the terror. Underground networks began to form, laying the groundwork for resistance movements. The psychological impact of the Einsatzgruppen was profound, affecting both morale and the social fabric of towns and villages. The Einsatzgruppen's presence highlighted the harsh reality of modern warfare. Victory on the battlefield was often accompanied by suffering among civilians. Polish soldiers were forced to consider not only military strategy, but also the protection of non-combatants, while the civilian population had to navigate survival in a rapidly occupied country. The atrocities became a grim reminder of the human cost of occupation and the ruthless nature of the invading forces. This chapter of the invasion left an indelible mark on Polish society. Families were destroyed, communities decimated, and the collective trauma would influence the resistance movements that emerged in the coming years. While the Wehrmacht advanced with military precision, the Einsatzgruppen ensured that terror and fear accompanied every conquest, setting the stage for the broader atrocities of World War II. The Battle of Kock, fought from October 2 to 5, 1939, marked one of the final engagements of the September campaign. Polish forces under General Franciszek Kleeberg, forming the independent operational group Polsy, faced the task of delaying German advances despite being surrounded and outnumbered. This battle would become a symbol of strategic skill, courage, and perseverance against overwhelming odds. Kleeberg's troops were composed of regular army units, reserve soldiers and volunteers, many of whom had retreated from earlier engagements. They were equipped with limited artillery, rifles, and machine guns, often scavenged from previous battles. Soldiers quickly established defensive positions near forests, hills, and river crossings, maximizing terrain advantages. Civilians provided intelligence, assisted in transporting supplies, and aided the wounded, further strengthening the defenders' efforts. German forces approached with superior numbers, mechanized units, and artillery support. Their strategy focused on encircling Kleeberg's forces and forcing a surrender. However, Polish defenders utilized mobility, ambush tactics, and strategic counterattacks to delay the enemy. Cavalry units conducted reconnaissance and flanking maneuvers, while artillery crews targeted advancing German tanks and infantry with precision. The fighting at Koch was intense and close quarters. Soldiers engaged in skirmishes in forests and fields. Artillery barrages echoed across the landscape, and both sides suffered significant casualties. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Polish forces maintained discipline, rotating troops, fortifying positions, and improvising strategies to compensate for limited resources. Civilians continued to play a crucial role, providing logistical support and maintaining morale. After several days of resistance, General Kleeberg recognized the futility of continued combat due to exhaustion, ammunition shortages, and encirclement. On October 5th, Polish forces surrendered honorably, having inflicted notable casualties on the German forces and demonstrated exceptional courage. The Battle of Koch became an enduring testament to tactical skill, resilience, and the determination of Polish soldiers to resist despite overwhelming odds. After weeks of relentless siege, bombardment, and urban combat, Warsaw faced the inevitability of surrender by late September 1939. The city, battered by Luftwaffe air raids, artillery shelling, and continuous ground assaults, had endured immense destruction. Civilians and soldiers alike had shown extraordinary courage, but dwindling supplies, mounting casualties, and the encirclement by German forces forced the city's leadership to consider capitulation. Polish commanders coordinated the evacuation of civilians where possible, prioritizing the wounded, elderly, and children. Makeshift shelters and hospitals had been overwhelmed, and urban infrastructure was severely damaged. Soldiers maintained defensive positions to delay German entry and protect fleeing citizens, embodying a final act of discipline and courage. Civilians, despite exhaustion and fear, assisted in evacuation efforts and continued to care for those trapped within the city. German forces, confident yet cautious due to Polish resistance, advanced through streets, occupying key buildings and bridges. Tanks, infantry, and artillery moved in coordination with Luftwaffe bombings to minimize further resistance. The Polish defenders, understanding the futility of prolonged combat, negotiated terms of surrender to prevent further civilian casualties and destruction. The surrender of Warsaw was solemn yet dignified. Soldiers laid down their arms, maintaining a sense of honor, while civilians emerged cautiously from shelters to witness the city's occupation. Despite defeat, the resistance had delayed German operations, inflicted casualties, and demonstrated the unbroken spirit of a nation. The city became a symbol of both tragedy and resilience, showing that courage in the face of overwhelming adversity could endure even under occupation. Following the surrender, German forces began consolidating control, enforcing strict occupation measures. Civilians faced curfews, property seizures, and the threat of reprisals, while soldiers were taken as prisoners of war. Yet the memory of Warsaw's defense inspired ongoing resistance efforts throughout the country, emphasizing that the human spirit and commitment to national identity could not be extinguished by force alone. Warsaw's capitulation marked a turning point in the September campaign, signaling the near-complete occupation of central Poland. However, the heroism displayed by its defenders and the resilience of its citizens would resonate in Polish memory for decades, serving as a testament to determination, unity, and the will to resist oppression. The city of Lviv, now Lviv, Ukraine, became a crucial defensive stronghold in southeastern Poland during the German invasion. Strategically located near the borders of Germany and the Soviet Union, Lviv was vital for controlling southeastern supply routes and preventing enemy encirclement. Polish forces, composed of regular army units, reserve soldiers, and local volunteers, prepared the city for a determined defense. Defenders fortified streets, key government buildings, and bridges. Artillery units were positioned on high ground to target advancing German troops, while infantry manned barricades and fortified positions. Civilians were mobilized to provide logistical support, transport supplies, and assist the wounded. Local knowledge of streets and terrain allowed defenders to execute ambushes and slow enemy advances. German forces attacked with mechanized units, tanks, and Luftwaffe bombers. The city's streets became battlefields, filled with smoke, explosions, and the chaos of urban combat. Polish defenders utilized every resource at their disposal, firing from windows, rooftops, and fortified barricades. Cavalry units and scouts moved along secondary roads to flank enemy columns and maintain communications. Despite valiant resistance, German superiority in numbers and firepower forced Polish forces to negotiate. Civilians, traumatized but resilient, continued to aid wounded soldiers and maintain order amid the destruction. The defense of Lviv delayed German advances in the southeast and demonstrated the courage and ingenuity of defenders, leaving an enduring legacy of resilience. On September 17, 1939, the Red Army invaded eastern Poland, exploiting the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Germany and the Soviet Union. This unexpected second front overwhelmed Polish defenses, already weakened by the German invasion. Soldiers and civilians alike faced a dire situation as Soviet forces advanced rapidly, targeting military units, communication hubs, and cities. Polish troops attempted to resist, forming defensive positions along rivers, bridges, and forests. Infantry and artillery units engaged the advancing Soviet tanks and mechanized divisions, but they were severely outnumbered and lacked adequate supplies. Officers coordinated desperate counterattacks and attempted to organize retreats to prevent encirclement. Civilians fled their homes, transporting belongings, assisting wounded soldiers, and seeking safety in the countryside. The Soviet invasion created chaos and panic. Cities and villages fell quickly, and communications were disrupted. Civilians witnessed mass arrests and intimidation tactics by Soviet forces, while soldiers struggled to maintain cohesion. Despite these challenges, Polish units displayed remarkable resilience, delaying Soviet advances in certain areas and buying time for civilians to escape to safer regions. The invasion demonstrated the peril of a two-front war and the vulnerability of Poland's eastern regions. Though ultimately unable to prevent occupation, Polish soldiers and civilians showed determination and resourcefulness under extreme pressure. The Soviet advance forced Polish command to adjust strategies, focus on retreats toward central regions, and consider surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. The occupation of eastern Poland by the Red Army marked a tragic chapter in Polish history. Families were separated, communities disrupted, and the social and political landscape fundamentally altered. The Soviet invasion, combined with the German attack, sealed Poland's fate in the September campaign, yet the courage and sacrifice of its people remained a testament to national resilience. By late September 1939, following the German and Soviet invasions, Polish forces were forced to retreat towards central and southeastern regions. The retreat aimed to regroup remaining units, protect civilians, and continue resistance wherever possible. Soldiers faced the immense challenge of moving across a country under simultaneous attack, with limited supplies, communication disruptions, and constant threats from both invaders. Polish troops used rivers, forests, and small towns to evade German and Soviet patrols. Cavalry units conducted reconnaissance, harassed enemy supply lines, and provided intelligence on approaching enemy forces. Infantry and artillery units moved along secondary roads, creating temporary defensive positions to delay pursuers. Officers coordinated retreats, issued orders for regrouping, and prioritized the evacuation of civilians. Civilians played a vital role in the retreat, assisting soldiers by transporting food, ammunition, and medical supplies. Families fled alongside military units, seeking safety in less contested areas. The journey was perilous, with constant threats from air raids, artillery, and enemy patrols. Yet Polish soldiers and civilians demonstrated extraordinary resilience. The retreat highlighted the strategic necessity of mobility, coordination, and local knowledge. While unable to prevent occupation, Polish forces sought to preserve their strength for future engagements, protect civilians, and maintain morale. Despite exhaustion and despair, the retreat showcased the determination of a nation to resist occupation and continue the struggle for independence. The retreat eastward set the stage for subsequent defensive efforts, including battles in the eastern regions and eventual underground resistance. It also emphasized the human cost of war, displacement, hardship, and loss, but underscored the unbroken spirit of the Polish army and its citizens. The Battle of Tomasów Lubelski, fought in mid-September 1939, became one of the largest engagements of the September campaign after Warsaw fell. Polish forces, including units from the Kraków and Lublin armies, sought to halt German advances in southeastern Poland and protect retreating civilians. Despite being exhausted and poorly supplied, soldiers demonstrated remarkable coordination and determination. The battlefield spanned forests, rivers, and open fields. Polish infantry established defensive lines while artillery targeted approaching German columns. Cavalry units conducted reconnaissance and harassing attacks, exploiting the terrain to slow mechanized forces. Civilians supported the army by transporting food, ammunition, and medical supplies, while assisting the wounded. The combination of tactical ingenuity and local knowledge allowed Polish forces to inflict casualties, despite overwhelming enemy superiority. German forces, reinforced with tanks, artillery, and Luftwaffe support, aimed to encircle and destroy Polish units. Air raids created confusion, while artillery shelling and mechanized assaults tested the defenders' resilience. Despite repeated German attempts to breach defenses, Polish soldiers held key positions and executed counterattacks. Cavalry flanked enemy columns, while infantry engaged in close-quarter combat to delay the advance. After several days of intense fighting, Polish forces were eventually encircled and forced to surrender due to exhaustion, depleted ammunition, and mounting casualties. Nevertheless, the battle showcased the bravery and tactical skill of Polish units, as well as the determination of civilians who aided them. Tomasów Lubelski became a symbol of resistance, illustrating how even an exhausted army could challenge a superior foe through strategy, courage, and unity. As the September campaign drew to a close, the iconic Polish cavalry units continued to play a critical role, despite being outnumbered and outgunned by mechanized German and Soviet forces. These units, often misunderstood by outsiders as outdated, combined speed, mobility, and tactical ingenuity to harass enemy lines, perform reconnaissance, and support infantry in defensive operations. Cavalry units conducted daring flanking maneuvers against advancing German columns. Using forests, rivers, and small villages as cover, they attacked enemy supply lines, disrupted armored movements, and gathered intelligence. Infantry and artillery coordinated with the cavalry to maximize the impact of these surprise strikes, demonstrating the adaptability of the Polish army in modern warfare. The final cavalry charges were both strategic and symbolic. Soldiers exhibited extraordinary courage, often riding directly into superior enemy positions to protect retreating forces or civilians. Civilians supported these efforts by assisting with supplies, evacuating the wounded, and providing local intelligence about enemy movements. Despite high casualties, the charges delayed enemy operations, allowing scattered Polish units to regroup or retreat safely. These last cavalry engagements became emblematic of Polish resilience and tactical ingenuity. They demonstrated that even against mechanized forces, mobility, terrain knowledge, and coordinated attacks could yield significant results. The courage of the cavalry left a lasting impression on both Polish society and the invading forces, highlighting the human element of warfare in a rapidly modernizing battlefield. By late September 1939, German and Soviet advances had forced the surrender of Poland's remaining border fortresses. Strongholds such as Brzeź, Modlin, and Lwów, which had resisted enemy attacks for weeks, finally succumbed due to encirclement, depleted supplies, and relentless bombardment. The fall of these fortresses marked the near-complete occupation of Poland, yet the defenders' courage and strategy remained remarkable. Polish soldiers manned the fortresses with limited ammunition, artillery, and food. Officers coordinated defensive efforts, rotating troops, and maximizing the use of terrain and fortifications. Civilians within and around the fortresses provided logistical support, assisted the wounded, and maintained morale under extreme stress. German forces employed combined arms tactics, including mechanized infantry, tanks, artillery, and Luftwaffe bombings, to overcome the defenders. Despite overwhelming odds, Polish forces inflicted notable casualties on the enemy and delayed operations. Artillery units targeted advancing troops, snipers occupied strategic positions, and soldiers executed counterattacks to disrupt assaults. Civilians worked tirelessly alongside the military, moving supplies and providing first aid. The fortress's resistance, though ultimately unsuccessful in preventing occupation, exemplified tactical skill, discipline, and national pride. The surrender of Poland's border fortresses had profound consequences. Soldiers were taken as prisoners of war, civilians faced occupation, and key cities and infrastructure fell into enemy hands. Yet the legacy of these fortresses endured, inspiring resistance movements and symbolizing the indomitable spirit of the Polish army and population. The fall of the fortresses marked the end of conventional resistance, but the struggle for freedom would continue in underground movements and future engagements. As the sun set over the ravaged landscapes of September 1939, Poland had endured unimaginable trials. Cities lay in ruins, fortresses had fallen, and countless soldiers and civilians had given their lives defending their homeland. Yet, amid the destruction, the story of courage, resilience, and unyielding spirit shone brighter than any battlefield fire. Every soldier who stood against overwhelming odds, every civilian who carried supplies, aided the wounded, or simply refused to surrender their hope, became part of a legacy that no invader could erase. The invasion of Poland was not merely a chapter in military history, it was a testament to the human spirit. It reminds us that even in the darkest hours, people find strength, unity, and purpose. Through barricades, trenches, and the smoke of battle, Poland's defenders taught the world a lesson: freedom and dignity are worth every sacrifice. As you watch this story unfold, let it inspire reflection and gratitude. Remember the faces, the courage, and the unwavering determination of those who fought, not for glory, but for their homes, families, and nation. Though the battle was lost, their spirit endures, echoing across generations, a timeless symbol of bravery, sacrifice, and the enduring fight for liberty.